Officially joining the group of 15 most populous countries in the world with a sizable domestic market, Vietnam has a lot of opportunities to build a forceful country for today's and for tomorrow's generations. And along with that comes some challenges of an aging population and growing old before becoming rich. How should Vietnam take advantage of this achievement while preventing the potential threat in the future? We'll delve deep into this matter with our guest in today's Talk Vietnam show. Let's welcome Ms. Naomi Kitahara, the United Nations Population Fund UNFPA representative in Vietnam, professor in economics Dr. Giang Thanh Long, who is a lecturer at National Economics University. Well, first of all, thank you to our guest today. Our first question is dedicated to Ms. Naomi. So according to UNFPA, Vietnam has reached the population size, the milestone of 100 million people. So what does this number mean?
It's actually a triumph because Vietnam, which was once a war-torn country, has been successful to take millions of people out of poverty and to reach such an impressive socioeconomic growth. So it should be a story of victory. And so it's important that we take on that footing and celebrate where we came from and the progress we have achieved in Vietnam. And then for us, that's the central message we want to send to Vietnam as the United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, to the Vietnamese population so that we celebrate achievement.
So what constitutes the success?
So today in Vietnam, people are healthier, people live longer, more and more people are more educated and having higher level of education. And then more people are employed, they have great jobs. So this is a success. And the quality of life has improved immensely in Vietnam. And it's important that we take note of that. And we advise Vietnam to continue to invest in health and education and employment in particular. Because when we look at the Vietnam's population structure, demographic window of opportunity is still open, and what we call demographic dividend is there, which means that as long as the right investment is made, we can have accelerated growth in economic and social fields.
When we talk about Vietnam, I also want to make a comparison of the scale, the size of the Vietnamese population compared to other countries. So what can you say about how is the Vietnamese population scale?
So as we mentioned at the beginning, Vietnam's now 15th country, with the populous, country in the world, and also the third in the ASEAN. So in terms of that kind of size, we just follow Indonesia and the Philippines. So it means, within the community in ASEAN, we have quite a number of, policy implications for that, like domestic market size, how to prepare a young generation in order to prepare for the aging population in the coming time. So just want to add with the real number, about the population. So now we have about 67 million people, aged 15 to 64. So usually we call that one is a working age population. So huge, about 2/3 of the population. And then, youth population is around 19 million. So it means that we have huge opportunity to take advantage of that kind of number of people, for the economic growth and development. And then at the same time, we can prepare for around expected 22 million older people by mid of this century.
How does the population size translate into economic country's competitiveness?
The Vietnam's 100 million is actually a very good one, because that means we have sizable domestic market to stimulate the country's economy. And then that means also it's one of the possibilities that foreign investors look at, because foreign investors, they're not going to look at the market which is so small and tiny, because then the cost becomes high. But Vietnam has highly educated and healthy population, and then 100 million of them. So it is an attractive destination for foreign direct investors. And then I have every confidence that such healthy and well-educated population will continue to drive the country's economy and develop socially as well. So that there are good signs that we can look at.
Vietnam is now enjoying a demographic window of opportunity. It means there's only one dependent person for every 2 or more working-age people aged 15 to 64. Vietnam also has the youngest population in history, with people aged 10 to 24 making up 21% of the total population. With the availability of a young labor force, Vietnam is on the threshold of boosting labor productivity, building new economic breakthroughs, and improving population demographics. Between 1990 to 2019, Vietnam's Human Development Index, or HDI, increased by nearly 46%, among the highest HDI growth rates in the world. In addition, the Youth Development Index reached 0.667, ranking 4th in the ASEAN region. These figures show the great efforts of Vietnam in building high-quality human resources for the country's sustainable growth.
Vietnam is enjoying the demographic window of opportunity. So could you provide some analysis on the advantages that this may bring to the economic development in Vietnam?
This is based on the theory which was proven to be true. And so we talked about demographic transition, mortality decline followed by fertility decline, and that window gives the demographic dividend. And the countries which tapped into demographic dividend, such as Japan, Korea, Singapore, those are the countries which really made sure that they invested in health and education of the population, young people, when they had the demographic dividend. And we know those are the countries which really made sure of fast and massive socioeconomic growth. So I say socioeconomic growth because it's not just the economy. The impact is not just on the economy, but on society, social growth as well. So, but then condition is that investment. Investment has to be the right investment on health, education, and job creation, employment opportunities for young people. As long as we make sure and the public resources invested in this, the country's impressive socioeconomic growth can be assured. So this is, once again, this is the theory which was put in place and which was proven to be effective.
So the story of Japan and other countries, they made that decision to invest in the young population years ago, right? And now they are seeing the results.
Right.
That's
so
why
Vietnam can
proven.
learn from that experience and then apply that in Vietnamese way. We don't have to have one standardized way of doing it because each country is different. But theory states that now the window of opportunity is open for Vietnam until 2039. So we must not miss that opportunity. And also the theory states this is once-off opportunity, irreversible. So, you know, the theory states mortality decline, fertility decline, and then that is the opportunity. So Vietnam should not lose this opportunity until 2039.
Do you have any comment on that?
I just want to add to what Naomi just said, you know, that in miracle era, in 1960 to 1990 for Japan, South Korea, and also other countries, you know, along with their demographic dividend, actually window of opportunity, but they turn that one to dividend because they apply a lot of number of, you know, policy. For instance, in the labor market, not only improving the productivity of labor, but also they empower, you know, the role of women in the labor market because, you know, they add up with the job for women, and then economic power of women is increased, and therefore, you know, add up to the economic growth of the country. So, and at the same time, you know, population, you know, also improve in terms of quality because of education, because of healthcare. So back to the case of Vietnam. As Naomi also already mentioned, you know, we have about 17 years left for the window because now it's opening. So take it and, you know, promote the role of population in development. Otherwise, we will miss that one, and theoretically, we have no chance to return.
Vietnam entered the golden population period only 30 years after the country's reunification. This is thanks to the great success of the family planning policy implemented in 1961, which reduced the total fertility rate from 6.4 children to only 2.09 in 2006. Such achievement affirmed the government's great effort and the effectiveness of policies in promoting family planning and improving women's access to modern contraceptives.
Cái khả năng tiếp cận đến với các cái biện pháp phòng tránh thai thì nó đã đạt được cái tỷ lệ rất là cao, đồng thời là cũng giảm đáng kể cái khoảng cách về cái khả năng tiếp cận đến các cái dịch vụ, các cái biện pháp phòng tránh thai giữa các cái vùng miền thành thị với nông thôn chỉ còn là 0,2%, thì cái tỷ lệ mà sử dụng các cái biện pháp tránh thai cao hơn so với cái ước tính bình quân ở trên thế giới.
Vietnam is one of the only 6 countries worldwide to successfully achieve the Millennium Development Goal 5 on reducing maternal mortality by 2015. Over 92% of the Vietnamese population is currently participating in health insurance. The country achieved a coverage index for essential health services of 73 in 100, higher than the Southeast Asia's average and the world's average.
The increasing rate of people in Vietnam now covered with social health insurance represents excellent progress towards universal health coverage. To achieve this, the government has used state revenue to cover premiums for many vulnerable and disadvantaged groups and partial subsidies to other priority groups such as school children, older people and households working in rural and agricultural sectors. Compared to other countries of similar levels of socio-economic development, the government of Vietnam is doing very well.
In terms of nutrition, Vietnam successfully achieved the Millennium Development Goals, with the rate of underweight children under 5 years old dropping to less than 20%. In addition, the physique of Vietnamese people has also been significantly improved thanks to the National Nutrition Strategy.
Các mô hình dự án đã được triển khai tại Việt Nam là những bài học kinh nghiệm rất tốt để chúng tôi có thể chia sẻ rộng rãi ở cấp quốc gia và quốc tế. Ví dụ như mô hình cải thiện dinh dưỡng cho trẻ em dưới 5 tuổi, tập trung vào thể thấp còi thông qua việc lồng ghép cải thiện an ninh thực phẩm, dinh dưỡng hộ gia đình, chăm sóc sức khỏe, dinh dưỡng cho bà mẹ và trẻ em đã được thực hiện rất là thành công.
In the World Bank's 2018 report on learning development, Vietnam is among the world's top 10 performing education system. The country's human capital index is also higher than the countries with similar income levels. In particular, online learning in Vietnam shows more positive results, with 80% of students participating thanks to high-speed internet connectivity, higher than the average of 67.5% for OECD countries.
It was wonderful to see that during the pandemic that the Vietnamese government quickly adopted a remote learning model, and it empowered schools to teach. And it puts Vietnam well above many countries in the world which are far richer.
Specialists advise Vietnam to continue to invest in youth through health and education and integrate population factors into the country's socio-economic development policies.
Ms. Kitara, what impressed you the most about the course of Vietnam's development in enhancing its human resources since đổi mới?
Right. Yes, human resources are the asset of the country, right? So let me give you some statistics. I need to raise it. Vietnam reduced the poverty rate from 16.8% to 5% between the period of 2010-2020. And then 3.62% in 2022. This is massive. I think there are only a few countries in the world which managed to do this. And then we tend to forget the fact that Vietnam had a war. And then today, when we look around the world, there are countries, unfortunately, at war. And Vietnam's story should be told to the world that yes, you know, a country may go through a war, but then achievement can be possible if the country's direction is set in the right way and the right investment is made. And then one of the key investment to be made is the human resources. So I talked about health, education, and employment opportunities. Those are critical. And Vietnam has done a very good job on this one. And when I look at the Vietnamese young people in particular, I always get so impressed. They're dynamic, they're open, and also they're innovative. They have so many creative ideas. I look at social media and I get always very impressed with Vietnamese young people. The way they communicate, the way they express their ideas, it's impressive. And then this is the dynamism that the Vietnamese human resources are coming in. Because without dynamism, there is no innovation of the country. Without innovation, there is no economic development. But Vietnam has that potential there. And so I really encourage Vietnam to continue to invest in young people. Like that, Vietnam's current target to become a high-income country, that can be possible in coming years.
Despite its many achievements, Vietnam still faces population challenges. Vietnam's quote-unquote demographic window of opportunity is starting to close as the aging process accelerates. The elderly population in Vietnam has increased rapidly. People aged 60 and above accounted for 11.9% of the total population in 2019. The number is projected to reach 20% in 2036, making Vietnam enter the aged population stage. The rapid aging of population will pose many challenges for the nation, especially the risk of getting old before getting rich. The next challenge is the gender imbalance at birth. According to the forecasts of the General Statistics Office and UNFPA, by 2034, Vietnam will have an excess of 1.5 million men. This number will increase in the following years due to the mentality of son over daughter preference. The third challenge is the uneven distribution of the population. Due to massive industrial development and urbanization, the population distribution is also very different among localities within the same region. For example, although Hanoi only occupies 1% of the country's area, it is the second most populous city with 8.4 million people. This has led to environmental consequences, labor pressure, and even increased social evils.
So taking the current situation into account, what advice do you think the government should implement?
Population aging happens not because people live longer. Population aging happens because of fertility decline. Because it's a population pyramid, right? Vietnam was like this pyramid. And the fertility was declining. And then now population aging. So it's a fertility issue. Of course, mortality decline has an impact, but it's not just a mortality issue, but it's a fertility issue. And that's the first point that we would like everybody to understand it. It's a fertility issue. Population aging is a fertility issue. Right. So that's why it's important for people to be able to decide freely and responsibly the number of children. And we really urge Vietnam to make that adjustment as quickly as possible because population aging is progressing so fast. And now we are seeing in many places in Vietnam, low fertility. Right. So why are we limiting fertility when we have a low fertility issue, right? So that's the first advice. And so when we talk about population size structure, of course, population aging is the first issue, but then also the other issue is missing girls, gender biased sex selection. Gender biased sex selection happens not just because of some preference, not just because people prefer to have sons to daughters, but also because there's, of course, the technology is available, but also because of fertility decline and a fertility limitation. So again, it's a fertility issue. Right. And it's important to recognize this. And then because people basically have two chances, right? And the first one is a girl, a second one is a girl. Then the tendency is to terminate the pregnancy for the second girl, if not the first one. Right. So that is the situation right now. And Vietnam, we really urge Vietnam to address this issue now, both for the population aging and the gender biased sex selection front, so that we have more equitable demographic structure. Unless that happens, it would be very difficult to make sure that the Vietnamese population have the right access to the right public services. And so that's the important part, equitable access to public services.
Talking from the Vietnam side, what do you think? Because in the past, we used to have campaign, right, from the government encouraging family to have less than 2 children, right? Yeah.
And actually, it took us about 30 years to just change one word. Should have like maximum 2 children, but now should have at least 2 children. So something like that. So back to that, to what Naomi just mentioned. When taking into account various, like a population issue, we should not only take into account, the issue of the whole nation, but also we should look at, like at the provincial level. What I say is about the aging population, for instance, because different province, they have different capacity in serving older people, right? In terms of social protection, in terms of health. For instance, in 2019, according to the population and housing census, the aging index in Vietnam, measuring by number of older people, age 60 and over, divided by 100 children, age 0 to 14. No province in Vietnam more than 100 in 2019. But from 2029, we have 14 provinces, more than 100. But after 10 years, 2039, we have 41. It means 2/3 of the province in Vietnam, we have more older people than children. So it means when we have like shift, the population structure, from young to old, it means we also have to change, a lot of policy going along. On the one hand, as Naomi already mentioned, still continuing with the education and health investment. But at the same time, maybe we have to turn with the long-term care and also healthcare for increasing number of older people. So what I mean here is that, the policy should be adaptive with the situation rather than, like doing something prevent, aging population. That is not really, feasible for not only Vietnam, but also any other country in the world to prevent, aging population.
It only takes Vietnam 25 years to reach aging population status. This rapid pace of population aging poses many challenges for Vietnam, including healthcare for older people. Besides public sector care facilities, many new private nursing homes for older people's care have been established. Every morning at 7:50 a.m., these elders are dropped off for daycare before returning home in the afternoon. Instead of typical nursing care settings or staying at home with their adult children, these seniors opt for elder daycare because they can see both physical and mental improvements.
Tất cả các bạn già với nhau là vui vẻ phấn khởi, với nhau trò chuyện như là một gia đình. Ở nhà thì con thì đi công tác, cháu đi học, chỉ có mỗi mình ở nhà với một con chó. Thành thử ra trở đi trở lại cũng chỉ có một mình, thành thử ra chả biết trò chuyện với ai.
Từ khi đến trung tâm cho tới giờ thì tôi thấy được 4 tháng rồi và tôi thấy là sức khỏe cải thiện.
In the next 2 to 3 decades, when Vietnam's population is deep into its aging population phase, demand for older adult healthcare will only increase. Easing the burden on public healthcare calls for the participation of the private sector. However, with a service charge ranging from $21 to $25 per day, based on the current average monthly pension of $230, private healthcare services are out of reach for many. This requires subsidies so that service fees can be reduced and become more accessible.
Ai cũng mong muốn là được chăm sóc trong một cái điều kiện tốt nhất. Do vậy là cần một cái sự hỗ trợ rất lớn từ chính sách của nhà nước để làm sao các trung tâm dưỡng lão khi mà phát triển ra họ không bị quá áp lực về vấn đề về kinh tế, họ không bị quá áp lực bởi các cái chi phí hàng ngày.
Apart from senior care, ensuring income security is also one of the issues that Vietnam has to grapple with when its population is aging. Older people used to depend on their children, but more people are becoming like this man. He is financially independent by growing organic bean sprouts using seed capital borrowed from a club.
Có hội viên vay thì để bán hàng, bán đồ ăn, nuôi chim bồ câu, nuôi gà. Khi được vay, đầu mùa cái thu hoạch đậu tôi mua tôi để dành thì cái giá thành của sản phẩm của mình nó sẽ ổn định.
Các cái đối tượng cho vay là những người có cái kinh nghiệm kinh doanh và có sức khỏe kinh doanh, để kinh doanh ra được lãi thì mới giúp đỡ được những người khó khăn.
According to the government scheme for expanding the intergenerational self-help model before 2025, many districts nationwide have adopted it. Moreover, the government has provided assistance to alleviate problems associated with an aging population. For example, the draft revised law on social insurance ensures state retirement benefits for elders aged 80 or over who do not receive a pension or monthly social insurance allowance. However, though there have been some countermeasures, social security and income security gaps still exist, and Vietnam needs to address these in the future.
Speaking of older people, current government social protection policies only cover about 8% of the senior group. And it is forecast that by 2049, medical needs of the elderly would increase 2.5 times compared to today. So how should Vietnam take care of older people in the future?
We have to prepare very well for about more than 20 million older people in terms of income security and in terms of health protection. So on the one hand, for income security, we have to expand the retirement system, and at the same time maybe social assistance system. And that is why now we are amending the law on social insurance in order to integrate both system of social insurance and social assistance together in order to get people inside the system. And about the healthcare, one thing is that our national survey in 3 waves in 2011, 2019, and 2022, showing that now people facing more non-communicable disease with higher cost of treatment, and that is why we need to prepare from now for the health system and also to prevent some kind of prevalence of non-communicable disease. I think that the number is about 2.5 times or 5 times or even 10 times. It depends on how well we prepare from now for the older people in the future. Because one thing I just want to emphasize that when we talk about older people, we should think very clearly older people now or older people in the future. Because older people in the future, it means young generation now, right? If we don't prepare now, it means in the future, when we become older person, we will face a lot of problem with economic and health insecurity.
Right, yeah. So it's important to identify the time context when we talk now or in the future. Yeah. Also, in a recent survey, it revealed that only 4 out of 10 people aged 30 to 45 years old are confident of being financially independent in their old age. So what strategies should Vietnam implement to provide an income guarantee for the elderly people?
What we advocate for is what we call life cycle approach. So instead of elderly population becoming worried about their life only when they reach the aged period of life, we prepare young people early enough. So that means the pension system, investment that they can make. So don't let that young period just like that, but then start to think about their life in an aged period early enough and do the right preparation early enough. And so that's important, whether it is institutional care that we are trying to increase and then improve the quality for. Also community-based care model that we are piloting. Also long-term care system that we are trying to see the applicability to Vietnam, learning from different countries. So whatever the system we bring up with, it's important that young people are on board. Because they are going through that stage sooner or later. Right. So that life cycle approach is what we are advising the government for in their integration of the policy and the strategies for the elderly.
According to experts, To become a high-income country in the mid-century, Vietnam must maintain an annual GDP growth rate of around 7%, a figure considerably higher than its current average GDP growth rate of 5 to 6%. Improving labor productivity is a key solution for Vietnam to achieve this target. And to increase labor productivity, Vietnam needs to enhance the quality of its workforce by investing more resources into high value-added industries.
So the focus should be placed on enhancing skills for workers and creating jobs for many groups: young people, middle-aged people or workers, people that have disadvantages, and female workers also. Solutions are also needed to quickly formalize the informal economy while supporting migrant workers when they move, for instance, from rural to urban areas, or even when they come back from abroad and want to be integrated into the society again.
A new educational trend is being applied by many of Vietnam's vocational schools and universities that is training based on business requirements. For instance, this educational institution has partnered with many large businesses to train their students according to business-specific needs in fields such as automotive engineering, information technology, and nursing. This institution has become a bridge connecting employers and workers. As a result, students have jobs that match their majors, and businesses do not have to retrain them. It helps create a quality workforce without the need for a university education.
Hiện nay thì cái xu hướng mà chuyển dịch về các cái ngành nghề mà có tay nghề cao nhưng mà có việc làm ngay thì nó xu hướng xã hội nó tăng lên. Thì đặc biệt là cái mà ở phổ thông phân luồng á thì nó cũng tạo cái điều kiện để cho các em giảm cái ham muốn đi học đại học đi.
Besides education, Vietnam strives to improve its technical capacity, integrate deeper into the global supply chain, increase labor productivity, and enhance technical expertise in production and business. Core technology sectors such as artificial intelligence or AI, 5G technology, the Internet of Things, IoT, big data analytics, and blockchains are being focused on for development in Vietnam.
Vietnamese young students, they learn very fast, so it's quite easy for the company to grow in Vietnam if they want to have a good engineer. I understand that there have some startup, they want to design the chip I call make in Vietnam. So they design the chip from beginning and then try to bring to another factory out overseas to make the chip and can do the commercialize.
A 13th National Party Congress resolution identified 3 breakthrough strategies, including promoting human resources development, particularly qualified human resources. This involves improving the quality of education and effectively implementing recruitment policies, reinforcing scientific research, technology transfer, and applications, and tapping into the virtues of the Vietnamese culture and its people.
How have the population dynamics and demographic analysis been integrated in Vietnam's socio-economic development strategy and plan, as well as the National Action Plan for Sustainable Development?
I think that the current one, the socio-economic development strategy and the plan, both of them put the population aging pretty high on the agenda. I think it was, if I remember correctly, the same level as like things like digitization. So it is high. So that is very good, because then the government is recognizing it as the area of close looking. Right. And then they are aware that they have to deal with this issue. So that's very important. And but then on population aging, I wanted to state that we should not look at it as a crisis. And again, it's the demographic fear issue that we should avoid, that we talked about earlier, is to be analyzed. And you know, the population aging, yes, it's a critical demographic shift that we are seeing in the world and in Vietnam. But it can be an opportunity as well, because today's elderly population, they are healthier than before. Right. They can continue to work, and they can continue to make a good contribution to the country. And then they have such a vast experience and wisdom. that can be used for the country's growth and development. So many countries in the world are extending retirement age now because they're healthier, they can contribute. So that's one thing. And then also population aging presents a business opportunity as well. So for the private sector entities, because that means the services are required for the elderly care. Services are required for equipment for elderly care, beds and so forth. And medical equipment and supplies are required for the population aging. So it's a great business opportunity, and that the private sector companies can look at.
Just want to add that, how we design and implement policy depends on our mindset on the different group of population. For instance, if we just say older person like burden, we can make some kind of very, very horrible, policy for them. But once we change our mind, saying that, older person still access or bonus of the economy, of course we will have different kind of motivation for them to work on. So just give you one example. People age 60 and over now still about 40% still working. It means they are economically contributing to the economy. And especially people age 60 to 64, more than 60% still working. So it means if we have some kind of employability policy for them, it means we can mobilize them, for the economy, rather than just saying, okay, they are set aside as a burden for the economy. So I just want to say, not only Vietnam, but also many other countries facing the same problem, like aging population. They try to produce some kind of policy to avoid kind of ageism at work. It means like maybe they look older person like inferior, worker in the system. So how to employ them, how to provide the environment for working is very important for Vietnam in the coming time. Yes.
Generation Z, or Gen Z, were born between 1997 and 2012. By 2025, Gen Z is expected to make up 1/3 of Vietnam's workforce and will tremendously influence the domestic labor market shortly. Growing up in the digital era, young Gen Z people are considered tech-savvy and have the promise to make many important contributions to the digital transformation in Vietnam. So too are the young engineers born between 1997 and 2002 in this data center. They have successfully developed a customer care call monitoring system that identifies emotions through voice analysis to understand customers' needs quickly. This system has helped optimize call handler efficiency. It automatically controls hundreds of thousands of calls to the center daily. Due to the constant efforts and creativity, the engineers have won a prestigious award honoring new outstanding software products and digital services.
Những bạn Gen Z trẻ sinh năm 2000 đến 2002 như bây giờ ấy, thì thường là các bạn rất là nhạy bén, các bạn rất là giỏi. Tuy chưa có nhiều kinh nghiệm nhưng cái khả năng học hỏi của các bạn rất là lớn. Mình nghĩ đấy là một cái tiềm năng sẽ giúp cho Gen Z có thể nắm bắt được các cái công nghệ mới, các thành tựu mới của thế giới và áp dụng vào các cái sản phẩm thực tiễn, giải quyết các bài toán trong thực tế.
According to the World Economic Forum estimate, by 2030, 77% of jobs will require digital skills. The advancement of technology and the rise of the 4.0 revolution are creating a premise for new Vietnamese Gen Z jobs. And digital fashion design is one such example of this new employment frontier. Chen Quỳnh-Nhi, a freelance designer passionate about technology, wanted to step out of her comfort zone, so she chose to start her own business with digital fashion, also known as metaverse fashion. That is a very new field to many people in Vietnam. However, with 3D design software on her laptop, this Gen Z designer can freely create fashion products that are not bound by the physical limitations of traditional fashion and can easily reach many customers at home and abroad.
Fast fashion đang ngày một suy giảm và mọi người tập trung vào những cái giá trị bền vững và những cái giá trị mà không tổn hại đến môi trường hơn. Và thời trang metaverse đem lại cho con người ta cái hình ảnh đẹp mà lại không tốn một chút về nhân lực nhiều và cũng như là kiểu về tổn hại môi trường nhiều. Mình nghĩ là kiểu thế hệ nào cũng sẽ có những con người mới, và những người mới đấy thì thường phải là những người tiên phong và những người dám làm cái gì khác.
according to specialist recruitment consultancy Robert Walters. With many outstanding advantages, Gen Z employees are now securing mid-level and high-level position jobs.
Ứng viên của người Việt mình thì thông thường mà nói sẽ có một cái điểm yếu cố hữu, đó là về tiếng Anh, là về giao tiếp, về nói chuyện trước công chúng, về là về teamwork. Thì các bạn Gen Z hiện tại bây giờ các bạn đã rất là hoàn thiện về những cái kỹ năng này. Bên cạnh đó thì Gen Z thì được biết đến là các bạn biết các bạn muốn gì, các bạn rất tự tin, các bạn có đòi hỏi cao, các bạn tham vọng, nên thành ra mà nói các bạn cũng không ngại khó, ngại làm việc thêm.
The number of Gen Z working age people is currently estimated at more than 13 million. For many businesses, this will present opportunities and challenges to attract new workers who will soon become the driving force behind the country's economy.
What message would you send to our audience out there?
I have every confidence for Vietnam's success and socioeconomic growth. Vietnam is one of the countries where I have been, which gives me such big hopes and possibilities and dreams. So I trust Vietnam will soon become high-income country, and Vietnam has every possibility for that.
Mm-hmm. What about you?
Because we have a long talk about demographic window opportunities and how to turn that one to dividend, as well as prepare for population aging and age. So I think that whether population become burden or bonus, depending on how we design and implement the policy. So should think about that very carefully and to be adaptive with demographic trends.
Mm-hmm. A big thank to the contribution of our two guests today, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Yeah. And to the audience of Talk Vietnam, I hope that through the sharing of our guests today, you have a better understanding of the demographic window of opportunities that Vietnam is having, and hopefully the country will take the opportunities as well as prepare for the challenges to achieve the goal of become a developed country with high income by 2045. And that's it for Talk Vietnam. Thanks for watching and see you again next time.